I had a job to do, and I loved being out there, and I loved the challenge of leading paratroopers in that environment. And I was extremely angry and annoyed that I'd been shot. It sounds weird, even if you're not served, but I viewed it as a professional mistake, which it was. And so that was going through the mind more than anything else. And then when I was in a position where it was very obvious that I was on the edge and I was starting to go, everything is down to fighting to stay alive. You can feel the life and the blood draining out of you, literally. My name is Martin Hewitt, and I was serving as a captain in the Parachute Regiment when I was shot in the chest during a firefight with insurgents in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. The severity of the injuries resulted in the paralysis of my right arm, and I was medically discharged from the armed forces. Since then, I've represented my country in alpine downhill ski racing and gone on to establish the Adaptive Grand Slam, a project to climb the highest mountain on every continent of the world and walk to the North and South Poles unsupported. This is my story. When I went to do my A-levels, I joined the reserves, or the Territorial Army as it was back then, and I enjoyed the process of soldiering. But more importantly than anything else, I wanted something that gave me a sense of purpose, and I wanted to be in an environment where I felt I was being genuinely challenged. Through my time in the reserves, I got to see a lot of different parts of the army, and when I saw the Paras, they were a step ahead of everybody else. The performance standard there was so much higher. And I was at university during 9/11, and I thought, well, they're going to be going to war, and if I do that, you kind of want to be going with the best. And from my perspective, from everything I'd seen, the Paras were the best soldiers. It sounds a bit strange to say that you want to go on operational tours and put yourself in kind of harm's way, but that's what you want. You join the military in order to be tested and in order to lead, especially as an officer. So you want to go, you're excited to go. So in the build-up to when I got shot, we were deployed on a 5-day recce force, and we were probing an area that was a heavily defended stronghold of the enemy. We've been fighting every day, and then this morning we got involved in a big heavy firefight with a lot of enemy fighters, and there came a point where we were losing a bit of momentum, and so I went forward and tried to regain initiative, and during that process I was shot by a 7.62 caliber round. And that bullet went just above my body armour, straight through the part of my chest into the shoulder cavity. I had a collapsed lung, it shattered my scapula as it exited, but as it went through, it severed the brachial artery, and it severed all the nerves in my right arm, which rendered the arm paralysed. Because the area had been shot, we couldn't get a tourniquet on, so I was trying to get into the entrance wound with my hand to try and put pressure on, and you can feel yourself going. It's surreal, but you can feel yourself start to fade, and then you just got to fight to try and stay conscious, try and stay awake. Luckily for me, other soldiers were in the area that then took over the battle, and that enabled us an opportunity to do what's called a fight and withdrawal. During that process, I then got shot again in the foot, I think just for good measure, because the first one didn't kill me. And then we managed to get our way back to a medic who stopped the bleeding. My sergeant major was there on the radio to a Chinook pilot with a medical team, but he was telling them not to come in because they were within effective range of the enemy fighters, and I was dying, so they didn't want to risk losing the helicopter. Luckily enough for me, the pilot took ownership of the decision for himself and flew in regardless of the risk. And I remember a doctor looking over me and he said, "You're going to go into a coma now and you'll wake up in Birmingham." And a few seconds later, I was out. The severity of the injury had not hit home at all. I was adamant that the doctors would do their thing. I'd have a couple of operations in hospital. I'd get down the gym and rehab, and then I'd be back out in Afghanistan. I thought I'd be back out there before the end of that tour. I had nerve grafts, I had vein grafts, so I've now got a scar on the length of the arm because they had to open up the arm to try and reconnect the blood flow to get veins doing what the artery once did. So I wasn't necessarily accepting that my career was done to begin with. It probably took about 2 years before I realised that no amount of operations was going to enable my arm to start working properly and for me to have my career. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but you've got a choice. You either allow it to consume you and you become very bitter and twisted, or you have to improvise and adapt and look at what transferable skills you've got and what you're going to do to move on. I did have a moment when I was like, oh, flipping heck, why'd you get hit? And just at that moment, there was a Fijian lad called Derek who was in the ward with me, who'd been blown up by an IED, who wheeled past my bed with both of his legs missing. I was like, from this day on, you're never going to complain about it again. You're just going to get on and you're going to get things done because things could be worse. I was very fortunate when I was at Headley Court, which was a rehabilitation facility that we all went to. I was lucky to be there at a time when a group of people came together to establish an adaptive sport program, and they wanted to create a ski team. I ended up becoming a professional racer for a few years. The sport provided me with a positive focus, and so by the time I got medically discharged, I felt I was in a position to add value again. An email landed in my inbox and it just said North Pole, and that was it. I was like, right, whatever this is, I'm in. It was a chap called Ed who was looking to establish a team of injured veterans to walk to the North Pole to fundraise for a new charity called Walking with the Wounded. And no disabled person's ever done it, so it's going to be a world first. So I said, right, whatever it takes, I'm getting on this team. And for me, whilst the ski racing was fantastic, everything I'd done in the military was about the team. And being on that team filled me with a sense of fulfilment again that I hadn't had since I'd been injured. And that started a process which has led me to the Adaptive Grand Slam. Initially, it was a take on something called the Explorers Grand Slam, which is an endeavour to climb the highest peak on every continent of the world and to walk unsupported, unassisted to the North and South Poles. Originally, I had a team of 4 injured veterans, but over time, I started getting more people with disabilities, not just from the armed forces, but from a civilian background, asking to get involved. A big part of the project is to do as many expeditions that are out there that have never been done by a disabled team before, that able-bodied people will look at and question whether or not they could do that, because it's doing those events at that level that demonstrate that we can overcome the vast majority of things in life and change perceptions around what can be achieved with disability. The most challenging expedition I've had was a mountain called Pumori that we climbed, which is a 7,100 metre peak in the Himalayas. Doing that with a paralysed arm was probably the limit of what I'd look to do.
And what is it that keeps you going?
You could argue it's personal achievement, a fundraising target that you've got, egotistical reasons, but the reality is every time when you actually analyse it properly and when you're in the thick of that situation and it is difficult, it comes back to purpose. And what message does it send out if you quit? To quit something because of a weather event is one thing, but to quit something because it's a little bit hard, that's not really acceptable.
Do you miss your days in service?
Yes. To this day, I've been out now for a long time and I still miss the military. I still miss the Paras in particular, but it's the people. I miss the boys.
And given what you've been through and where you are now, would you do it all again?
In a heartbeat. You do struggle every now and then psychologically with what you've dealt with and what you've been through and experienced, but you chose that career, so I wouldn't change a thing. I'd do it all again.
Do you consider yourself a hero?
No, not in the slightest. We've chosen the life of service. That's not heroic. That's a professional decision that you're taking to do a professional job.
What about an inspiration then, Martin?
Some of the people that I've been with have been inspirational.
What about yourself?
Not at all. I see myself as being very privileged and very fortunate to have the opportunity to do the things that I'm doing. Like I said, I'm alive and I'm very fortunate to be alive. And a lot of people took a lot of risks to keep me alive when I got shot. I think I've got a duty to them to ensure that when the day finally comes, I'm hoping that I can look back and say you've done a few things that have helped and achieved a few things that you can be proud of. Well, I'd say people that are playing the Veterans Lottery are providing financial support to a number of different armed forces charities that help members of our armed forces achieve a fulfilling life. And so I think it's fantastic that you're doing it, and everybody within the armed forces community is grateful for your support. If you want to help British veterans and armed forces charities, please play the Veterans Lottery.